Good morning, everyone. Thanks for coming today. Would like to um, introduce Uncle Bill O'Brien, who some of you may have met yesterday or the day before. He's going to provide and deliver, I should say, a welcome to country and a talk, a cultural talk, and I'll pass it straight over.
Thank you again, Zach. Um, so again, from yesterday, you Madagai Kimbe, Piripi Pare, that means welcome friends to Biripi country. And this on behalf of Biripi people, custodians of this land, I would like to pay respect to the elders both past and present and extend that respect to each and everyone present. My feelings for this land is that of my ancestors and hope you can understand the importance of what this land means to the Biripi people. Firstly, I ask you to look and protect the beauty of the sea with its blue and its green and the life that is in it, as it continues to provide a nutritional diet to our people. Then gaze upon the golden sands and the jagged headland and the life that is there. The abundance of shellfish is another treat for us all to enjoy. Put your hand to your brow and you will see a river or two, a river that is like our veins. They bring life to the land and all the many creatures that surround it. There within the borders of the Biripi Nation is the green and the gold, the red and the black. That's in our beautiful hinterland. It has an abundance of wildlife, nuts and berries, and the shelter provides us. Then there's the sky with its ever-changing mood, the blue and the grey, the thunder and the whiteness of the lightning bolts. In the mornings they're reds, orange and yellows, and now and then they may be painted mauve or pink. And if for some reason you happen to miss it, don't worry too much, as it's repeated for you just before dusk. They're the ever-changing clouds and sometimes none at all, when the colours of the rainbow are such a sacred thing. Yes, we are the custodians of this great and beautiful land, handed down from our forefathers. So I seek to help my brothers and sisters to maintain the trust of our ancestors and care for our culture and the land. Yet when we get old, too old to run, it is then we'll pass on our land and culture to a much younger mob, to the young. Make us proud, grow strong, get the best education you can. Listen to the elders and their words of wisdom, because of their wisdom and their sacrifices, you now have a choice. And we hope your choice will always be a wise one, as this will ensure the future of the Biripi Nation. Sham, Madagai, Madambu, that means come. You're welcome. Thank you. I hope you've all had a nice cup of coffee and perked you all up, had a nice morning tea or breakfast, get you going for the day. Um, I'm here today to give a quick talk about culture and probably a bit of history. So the history of Port Macquarie as far as the Aboriginals are concerned. After settlement in 1821, most of the Aboriginals lived out of town. From there, and when the laws came in, they were put on the missions. So the last mission or reserve that was based around here was at Rollins Plains. So we call that place Brill. That's the name of that place for us. But that was the last reserve. And they moved the people off that reserve. Half of them went to Taree, to Purfleet, and the other half went to Burnt Bridge in Kempsey. Some of the children, they were taken to Cootamundra or Kinchela and down to Bomaderry. So there's a lot of sad history about this place. We also had a massacre here in the 1800s where we had over 300 Aboriginal men, women and children were killed, and that was just up at Blackman's Point. And that was never recorded as far as historians went, but it was recorded by Captain Wilson's in his diary, and that backed our oral history, and then we were able to prove it that way. So Port Macquarie was set up as a penal colony. So it was a penal colony to start it up. When they had the massacre at Blackman's Point, that was done by 3 timber cutters that started the problem. They went in, they raped the women, and then as they were trying to get away, the men come home and found them, and they killed 2 of them, but one escaped back to town. Then they got the what we call the bucks and the police, and they then rounded up the Aboriginals and pushed them down onto the point at Blackman's Point, and that's where the massacre happened. If you go to Blackman's Point and you come down off the highway, the road that you'll be on is the original highway. So they come through the town, didn't come into town, but it went through Blackman's Point and back over the river there. by the punts, and then up into Kempsey. Terramidji was the only person hung in Port Macquarie. The Terramidji was an Aboriginal man, and he was caught by the Bucks and taken into town. From there, he was taken to Sydney, where he was sentenced. He couldn't understand what they were talking about. He couldn't speak their language, so it was all English. He had no representatives, and they said he must be hung. So they brought him back to Port Macquarie, and he's the only man that was hung on the hill up on the headlands at Town Beach. So that's Terramidji. He was also accused of killing some settlers. I've been involved with the Land Council now for, I suppose, nearly 20 years. I've been their chairperson for approximately 18 of those 20 years. And it's gone from a bad place to a good place. We still have some issues. I guess I might be a silly question. Do you know of Mr. Barton? Okay, Mr. Barton, Edward Barton. So I see a few heads nodding. Okay, so a statue of him sits on our town green. So him sitting on our town green is a really offensive to us, because that's the burial place for us. So he's sitting on a sacred ground. And if you go through his records of his life, his history, he represented more or less Newcastle. But we come under Newcastle at that particular time in the voting area. So they put him as our first Prime Minister from Port Macquarie, which is not the truth. And they also state that he was elected, well, he was elected as the first Prime Minister of Australia, and he was also involved with the first documents setting out our constitution, where he left out the Aboriginal people who weren't counted in that census until in that particular document until I think 1967. We got a bit of recognition, but over the years there was those fights that were going on. So having all the oral history handed down to me here, growing up here, I was actually born in Sydney. My mum's part of the stolen generation. She was taken off Kempsey Mission as a young girl, taken over to Armidale to work on a sheep station. And I won't repeat all the things that happened to her, but that was not nice. My son actually done a documentary for his high school. And this is when the family found out what had actually happened to my mum. And we didn't know anything about it. I was in my 40s when I found out. But she was never angry. She just got on with life, and she taught us to do the same. So I lost my dad when I was a young boy. He died early. He was only 33, but he left mum with 10 kids. So my mum, being an Aboriginal woman trying to bring up 10 kids, you can just imagine the welfare. Knock nearly every week they were at our door. She chased one of them out with a pitchfork one day, because he went into the bathroom, and my three sisters were in there, and she was in the rose garden and came up and had a pitchfork in her hand. You knock and you be invited into my house before you just make your way in. So yeah, some really good stuff coming out of that documentary by my mum, but a lot of sad stuff. Really a lot of sad stuff, and it just goes to show you how strong women are. And I put that down as they are very, very strong. Okay, getting back to the Land Council, as I said, I've been involved with it for a long, long time. I went there. I had a massive heart attack. I had a triple bypass. I was taken to Sydney. And when I come back, I moped around. I went through depression. And my brother, I always called him my brother. He said, I want you to do something for me. I said, what's that? He said, I want you to be a tour guide at Sea Acres. So being a tour guide at Sea Acres, I knew nothing about trees. I knew nothing about birds, but I did have knowledge about bush food. So I started up the Bush Tucker Walk. So from that particular incident, we ended up with the Bush Tucker Walk, the Coastal Walk, the Yunyi Burragay program, which is a program that is set out for students from primary school right through the university. And we also have a Connecting the Country session out there as well. So just from those four things, I just got too busy and being involved with the Land Council. The Welcome to Country was come to me in a dream. And I state that because I suffered with bad migraines because I was a jockey by trade. I had a really bad fall of graft and spent 6 weeks in Sydney. And I was asked to do a Welcome to Country and I knew nothing about it. And I went to bed with that migraine and I woke up with that in my head. And I went straight to the computer and typed it all out. And I read it to my wife and my sister-in-law and they just started crying. And I thought, well, it must be good. So, but yeah, being involved with the Land Council, I had these ideas. I wanted to get back into community. I wanted to give back to community because I felt that I was given another chance because of my heart. So I got back into the community. And we now have a youth group program. We run that for primary school kids, Westport and Port Primary. So we have 10 kids from each school. Before we used to have many. I'm the bus driver, of course. Pick the kids up. Once a month, we have a birthday cake. We used to have a birthday cake every week, but we changed it because it was getting too expensive. So we put it down to once a month. So the kids would have their birthday. They would get first choice of the cake. And then we'd have Easter and Mother's Days and Father's Days programs for them to do stuff. And we'd also have a Black Santa at Christmas. So that Black Santa would come and we'd have this, I can't think of the name of the guy. He's got a motorbike, a trike, and he comes with Santa on the trike. And he's got all the toys in his bag. And we have a lot of toys donated. So all the kids get a present. Each and every kid gets a present. And even some of their little brothers and sisters get them. So that's another good thing for the kids. There's a lot of culture goes on there, a lot of culture and activities for the kids. We also have an early intervention program where the kids that are missed out on daycare, we have a couple of teachers actually getting a couple of the kids that are missing out and taking them in and bringing them up to speed in their reading and their writing and their maths. We also have women's groups. So with the women's, we have the sewing group. So this is one of my wife's. So you put your cups in it or your soup bowls in it. So can I throw it to someone and you can pass it around? Oh, how's that? It was meant to go there. Okay, so this is another program that was done for the women, and this one was done by Deb Robinson. And this is a felt bag. You can pass that around. My daughter does weaving. So she's done a mother that one. That one. That one. I actually helped her make that one. And this was done by one of the men and was given to my wife because she makes a lot of cheesecakes and stuff. And people just love the cheesecake and wattle seed cheesecake. And they also love the damper and the fried scones that she makes. I love the fried scones. And she says, I shouldn't eat them because of my heart. I said, that's the best thing for it. Makes me happy. So there's lots of good programs that are happening now at the Land Council with the women. And I do have, cannot go that way. I do have some books that you can, that are available. So Place of Banishment, that's more or less the history of Port Macquarie. And it also tells about John Oxley's trip down from the mountain and how he founded Port Macquarie. The Aboriginals were here first, of course. But he actually found the tracks that the Aboriginals were walking on, and he followed that track down the mountain, and he was searching for the mouth of the river, but he ended up about half a mile south, which ended up at Oxley Beach, and that's why it's called Oxley Beach. So that was the headlands that he landed on. And that particular track that he ended up walking on became the Oxley Highway. So that was a traditional Aboriginal bush track. So this is the black and white. This has got photos from Cootamundra and Kinchela. I've got two aunties in that particular one that were at Cootamundra. the Thomas Dick photos. I don't know if you've ever heard of the Thomas Dick photos. So Thomas Dick photos, these photos were taken 1910 to 1915. There's over 500 glass plate negatives, and the family, to be by a local Aboriginal Land Council and the family group. If you want to use any of the photos, you've got to get their permission now to use those photos. But Thomas Dick was chastised for taking these photos and going out with as they were called the blacks. He was chastised for that, and he was not very well received in the community that he grew up in. He's an oyster farmer by trade, but he loved to take the photos and he wanted to document everything about Aboriginal life. So he got them to actually take off their civilian clothes and go back to their traditional dress for these and pose for these photos. So they're available. The Mitchell Library has got all the glass plate negatives, but we have a part of the say in who can use them and who can't use them. So Securing the Truth. So that's the Bringing Them Home report. I don't know if you've all seen that book, but that is available through, as far as I know, through government. I pinched this one. And you know, there's a lot of good stuff around that you can read and catch up on history. And I just love history. It's always, I hated school, but I loved history. So these items here, these are the things that the men make. So I have different varieties of clapsticks, and they'll all have different sounds. So the men make the clapsticks, they make boomerangs. So these, we have Aaron from Spirit Creations. He comes to our men's group, and he actually showed us how to make these, and he makes these for all the All-Stars, the Aboriginal All-Stars that play footy. So he goes down, he participates in making them. He actually gave me this one. Pass them along. They won't buy them. And this is a shield. So this was our last project, making this shield. So it's got a little handle on the back. I haven't put the lace in it yet, but it's a shield. I have about 20 men come sometimes, but I'm averaging out about 10 to 15 men that participate in the men's group, which I run on Thursday night. So it's going to be on tonight. They all get a feed, depending on how many they are. It'll either be pizza, fish and chips, is if we've got hardly any men. And if we've got lots of men, it's normally Kentucky Fried and chips. I feed them well. They don't go home hungry, that's for sure. So these programs that are being run by the Land Council now, I find that with the men's group, because I'm involved so much with the men's group, just for their mental health. They come in, I don't tell them what they've got to do. The only thing I do tell them to do is clean up. But, you know, I'm just like one of their wives when they do that, I suppose, to do the right thing and clean up. So they come in, they do whatever they want to do. I don't tell them what to do, and we make stuff, or we sit there. A few of the guys have got guitars, they'll bring their guitars in, and they'll sit there and they'll start jamming and singing along. And I have a Maori come in, we call him Grandad, he's New Zealander. And he comes in, he plays the ukulele, and he's also got a guitar. So he puts a bit of his influence into this music as well. So it's really good for their mental health, and that's what it's all about. So I have that program. My wife, she helps run the sewing group and the craft group. My daughter runs a creative circle, and they meet at the Land Council and they do stuff. So it's another good way for women to also be helped with their mental health and get them out of the house for a while, because they need that break to get away from home. They need to get away and do stuff. And we're finding that a lot of women are very, very creative, and they'll bring ideas in as well. So, you do your own thing. I'm not long, I don't know how long I've got to talk. Okay, I can keep going, that's fine. I got a coffee there. So, with the Land Council, as I said, I've been involved with that. I'm actually an OAM. So my proper name is William O'Brien, OAM, but I don't go around telling everybody. But I've also been involved with Charles Sturt University. I was involved with the setting up and also the building of CSU here in Port Macquarie. So I am a companion to the University of CSU, and I'm only the fourth person to have that honour. And I don't go around spruiking that either. Because of the backlash, I get too much backlash if I go around. I do wear my medals when I'm doing citizenship ceremonies or do official business. I wear my medals. I don't wear them all the time. But I'm also just recently been given the award for Rotary here in Port Macquarie. So I don't ask for these awards; they're placed on me. But I got to tell you, it's not all about me. It's about my wife. Without her, I would not have succeeded in doing what I'm doing. She's just been the backbone to who I am. Since I've had my heart attack, I'll tell you, I met her at 16 and I've been with her ever since. We've been together for quite a long while. And I have two children, Kelly and Chris. Chris works for National Parks. My daughter now works for Mission Australia, and they both love their jobs. And also, I now have five grandchildren. I have two granddaughters and three grandsons. So I'm pretty well blessed. We now have a program also here in Port Macquarie called Cultural Fishing. So we're allowed to go out and do cultural activities in the fishing. So we can set nets, we can use hand spears, we can use crab pots. We've got the whole box and dice. And we can do it all traditionally if we want to do it that way. So off the top and stick photos, we actually made the bark canoe. And that was with the help from the guys from Kempsey. So it was another participation there. Every NAIDOC, we have we used to have a men's golf day on the Friday, and we would play Taree and Foster and play for a shield. And we also have a golf day at the end of the year for the regional men's group. And we have well over 80 guys turn up at that golf day, and each and every one of them get a prize. So no one misses out. So, and it's all about bringing Aboriginal men back together and talking and being community and also the mental health. So that's about me, and I hope you all have a lovely day, and I thank you for your time for the last 3 days. So 2 days. Thank you.
Thank you, Uncle Bill. It's been an honour for us all to have you here, welcoming us and educating us, and and bringing us together. We really appreciate it. I've got a small gift for you and your wife, because thank you, thank you, thank you.
By the way, put all my paladins on.
Good morning, everyone. I hope you're all doing well on the final day. Thank you, Uncle Bill. It was so great to hear about the history of this place. Not only the really terrible history, but also all the amazing things that are happening now and the resilience and just beauty of your culture. So thank you very much. We're going to kick off this program, and today we've got two guests. We're going to be talking about creating roadmaps for resilient communities. We've got a bit of a climate theme this morning. This presentation, we've got Deb Samuels and Ellie Bird, who are going to be speaking about coming together about their insights from decades of community-led recovery and resilience building, drawing on 4RR's national perspective and Resilient Lismore's grassroots experience in disaster response. We'll learn how tailored, locally driven strategies can empower regions to prepare for, respond to, and recover from crises. These real-world stories demonstrate how collaborative roadmaps grounded in trust, equity, and adaptability can transform vulnerability into strength and create connected communities that are culturally rich, economically diverse, and equipped to thrive into the future. This is a must for anyone passionate about sustainable, inclusive community development. So Deb's going to speak first, and Deb Samuels is the People Portfolio Lead at the Foundation for Rural and Regional Renewal. With a career in not-for-profit leadership spanning more than 2 decades, Deb has extensive experience across executive, fundraising, finance, and program development functions. Her lifelong passion for connecting people with purpose and opportunities can be traced all the way back to her first job as a volunteer camp counsellor and organising campus fundraising events while completing her business degree at UTS in Sydney. And I'll introduce Ellie as well. Ellie Bird is the founder of Resilient Lismore. Ellie Bird is the Executive Director in Resilient Lismore. She led one of Australia's most dynamic community-led recovery efforts following the catastrophic 2022 floods. Building an organisation from the ground up that has delivered over $5 million in aid, repaired more than 700 houses, coordinated thousands of volunteers, and fostered deep partnerships across government, philanthropy, and the community sector. So welcome both today.
Good morning. It's lovely to see everybody. I have my my trusty timer, so if I'm looking down, that's what I'm looking at, and I just need to figure out how to do these slides. I think it's that. Yes, fantastic. So obviously just want to start today by saying it's an absolute honour to be here. Thank you so much for having me. I'm going to tell you try and condense down an enormous amount of work that we've been doing at FRRR into 20 minutes. So forgive me if I sort of skip through things, and I'm also going to try and bring the voice of community that we work with into the conversation as well with a couple of videos. So let's see how we go. Of course, want to just start by acknowledging country, the beautiful lands of the Biripi people that we're meeting on today, and all of the lands that we get to do our incredible community work from, and pay respects to elders past, present, and emerging. And thank you to Uncle Bill for that amazing insight into the history and in many cases, the really difficult and challenging stories of this region, holding on to that storytelling and making sure that those storylines continue and that we continue to acknowledge those is such an important part of the community work that we do. And I chose that picture because I just thought it was, it actually looked a little bit like the day yesterday. And it also, there's no civilization in it, I guess. And I just thought, wow, what an amazing land this must have been back when, before colonization happened, and all of the wonderful things that Uncle Bill told us about the fishing and all of the craft activities that have transcended all of the generations. So setting the scene. if we apply, so the Foundation for Rural and Regional Renewal, does anyone know what that is? A few people, few nods, yes. So it usually gets called FRRR. We love acronyms at FRRR, and because it's a bit of a mouthful. And we have been working for 25 years to support communities to do the work that they do best, mainly through granting, being an intermediary organisation between government and philanthropy to get the funds onto the front lines to grassroots community work that I know you all support. So some of the key questions, thinking about, the ways that we work with community and how that might apply to what we're talking about today. How do we, co-create roadmaps for sustainable community-led resilience? And what does it take to make them effective and enduring? Because there's a lot of fly-in, fly-out work that happens, I think, in this space, in this place-based space. A lot of, really well-meaning interventions that come into community, stay for a little bit, potentially create some funding cliffs, where there was a lot of money and then suddenly there's no money, and all of these pieces of infrastructure have been built and then it goes away. So how do we actually create something that's a lot more sustainable and community-led that will be there long after whatever that intervention is gone? So our focus is on proven strategies that work in diverse contexts, evidence of impact from community-led initiatives, and understanding what matters most for long-term sustainability. So I'm going to go through a few of those things in a very short amount of time. So FRRR, what is FRRR? Well, we are the only national charity that supports rural, regional and remote communities. So there are a lot of funders in Australia. There's a lot of bodies and obviously government funding that comes into community, but FRRR is really the only one that focuses with a laser focus on rural communities, which is why I'm really happy to be here today. We work at the intersection of government and philanthropy and grassroots community. So sort of being the broker, I guess, of those services, making sure that they get into the right places. Over the past 25 years, we've granted over $155 million to over 13,000 projects across rural and regional Australia. So it's an enormous amount of projects, and often we find it's the smallest grants, the $5,000 for the new walk-in refrigerator for the organisation that delivers meals to communities, sometimes have the most impact. Recently, and by recently I mean in the past sort of 7 years or so, we've really been leaning into longer term place-based initiatives, and we currently have over 8 of those types of initiatives underway where we've been in communities for 3+ years, sometimes 5+ years, really working with individual communities to strengthen the fabric of their social infrastructure and their community infrastructure. So what have we learned from communities? We're tired of being consulted and then forgotten. Does that resonate with anyone? All of the consultation, people that come in and say, what do you need? What do you want? What's important to you? And then where does that go? Where's the feedback loop? As local leaders and volunteers, we're holding the line, but boy, are we exhausted. We hear this often, is that people who work at the front, like grassroots community organisations, especially in small communities, have so many hats. They work in 4 different organisations, and they're a volunteer in this one, and they're raising their families, and they're on the school committee, and they just are doing so much. And then when something like a natural disaster happens or COVID happens, now they are the ones that are on the front lines as well, managing that recovery effort. And so they are definitely exhausted. Don't fund us to fail with short timelines and red tape. So that we hear this a lot too. Here's some money, but you have to spend it by this time and in this way, and the reporting requirements are going to take you 6 months and most of the funding to actually get done. We hear this a lot from community. And trust us, we know what we need. I mean, how many times I reflect on a drive that I took from Wagga to Junee, where we passed a small town, a beautiful small town, that clearly was in need of some resourcing. And there was this big, shiny, new children's playground. There was no children. It was in the middle of nowhere. wasn't near a school or near a childcare centre or any of those things. And what occurred, and it was a big sign saying, you know, that it had been funded. And what occurred to me was perhaps that community said, what we desperately need most is a playground, a shiny new playground. My guess is there was funding available for playgrounds, and they were successful in getting that funding, which is fantastic. But could those funds have been used for more urgent priorities in that community is my first thought. And that's sort of what we're thinking about often at FRRR. So what we're seeing, community-led resilience is held together by trusted relationships and really under-recognised and under-resourced local leadership. Love being here and seeing the investment that's being made in your capability building and your networking, and even just the relationships and the trust that builds by coming together at forums like this one. Communities don't need to be rescued, but they do need partners that respect that they have that unique lived experience and the knowledge, and provide resourcing that back those community-led solutions. So I'm not going to go into any great detail because, again, we are going to be running a bit short of time, and I do want to get the community voice into the room. Communities know best what they need to thrive. We want to fund community-led solutions. We want to fund people and relationships. We want to prioritise embedding equity and inclusion, and that is especially for First Nations communities and for young people in communities, and evaluate progress not just through data, but through storytelling and meaningful change, which can't always be measured on an Excel spreadsheet. We have a lot of ways that we work with communities, from broad to deep. I'm not going to go into that in any great detail. You'll get these slides later, but the little one in red up there is the one I'm going to focus on now, and that's a program we've been running called Investing in Rural Community Futures. Now, it was launched in 2018, and it's a place-based response to invest in the not-for-profit sector. And I will, oh, did I just flick past the video? How do I, back one? Yep. How do I play the, oh, okay. So this is my chance to let community tell you a little bit about this program instead of me keep talking.
The elements and the stories that I get told when working in Wodjagama.
Before I ended up in Shorttrack, I struggled just talking to one person, and now I can stand and talk technically to a bunch of people. So it's helped me with my social skills, work skills. It's been created to be like a family space where everybody feels comfortable and happy within the workplace.
The Investing in Rural Community Futures program was designed in response to a narrative change, and the hypothesis that we were testing is that if you invest in grassroots community-led not-for-profits, supporting them in their organisational capacity and how they function, that they'll be able to advocate for themselves more effectively, be that within their communities and even beyond their communities, to be able to shift the systems that they're functioning in.
Unit's very, very good at standing up for one another, particularly when things get tough. So the purpose of the Junit Community Centre is to try and get the best possible outcome for our members of the community, our age, people living with disability and other vulnerable members.
Jumpstart, we have clients ringing up for assistance when they're in crisis, and the purpose of our organisation is to assist them with financial aid or practical assistance to be able to help jumpstart them out of their initial hurdle and get them back to a space of wellbeing.
IRCF is a wraparound support for not-for-profits in rural regional communities. That means, yes, funding, but also a locally based community facilitator. It means a community roadmap where the community comes together to articulate their needs and their goals together, as well as 6-monthly evaluation, giving them the opportunity to reflect.
Have someone come in and see you from a completely different aspect and say, I've got faith in you. I believe that with the right process, we can get you up and get you going. And the people now have so much more confidence that when someone's got faith in you, you'll do anything. What the relationship with FRRR has done is probably led to us getting about $1 to $2 million in funding. It's meant increased access for young people to the program. It's meant that employers are finding skilled young people. And I think the overall well-being, you know, in response from police and schools is that there's less negative behaviours in our community, which is a wonderful outcome when we're focusing on the individual and the wraparound support that they need.
One of the things that was quite noted in this program is seeing people put their hand up and groups actually working together rather than competing, and also the advocacy side of things. People are definitely advocating a lot better than what they used to. So we still have a bank, and the bank is actually opening longer hours, which is wonderful.
In terms of council involvement in IRCF programs, it's been a pleasure to work with the one in Leeton. I think that the opportunity has given communities the ability to really consolidate their purpose and their vision. They've got stronger direction. They know where to go to find resources and help and assistance, and they know how to collaborate more as a result.
I think the message for communities considering the IRCF program is good. It is empowering. It's not always easy. There's ups and downs, but at the end of the day, you are investing in community for vibrancy and longevity, and it is absolutely worth it.
Always so much better hearing it from the actual people that experienced it, right, than me talking about it. So there's so much to unpack in this program. So that video was made at the end of a 5-year journey where 3 communities, Nambucca, Leeton and Junee, went through this incredible program. And yes, there was funding to back it, but I think there's so much that we can take from it that doesn't necessarily depend on funding. The other place that we have now just finished our 5-year Investing in Rural Community Futures journey is on the south coast of New South Wales. And I think we've got people probably here represented from the south coast and also from those other communities as well. Was anyone here aware of the IRCF program running in their region or community? Okay. Yes. Okay. Fantastic. At least one. I was like, yes, at least one. The wonderful Jackie at the end there, the CEO of the Junee Community Centre, she said something like, "We still have a bank." So that probably out of context is like, what does that even mean? What it meant was that because of the capacity building in the program, she now and the community felt so much more empowered. They actually took a petition to Parliament in Canberra to keep the community bank because it was they were going to have no banks left in the community, which from a health impact perspective, you know, the older people living with a disability, people who were going to find it really hard to get into Wagga to do their banking, we're going to miss out on all of those services. And so they successfully lobbied, and having the time and the space and the confidence to do that was one of the outcomes of coming together as a community and having a collective plan and knowing that everyone was pulling in the same direction. I'm just checking my my timing here. I think we've still got a few more minutes. So there's a bunch of principles of engagement to this program, but the one I'm going to focus on today is the flexibility and this idea of creating a community roadmap. And again, I do think that you will actually get copies of these, so please feel free to use any of the information in here in your work. And we also have many resources on the FRRR website, and like 80-page evaluation reports on this program that will have so much more information if you'd like to see that. So a community roadmap is essentially setting a shared vision, which sounds simple, but I'm sure for anyone here that's tried to bring a group of people who have their own priorities and their own focus areas and their own funding realities and things like that together to create collective priorities, it's actually harder than it sounds. But once you've done it, that, collective principles of working together, it creates a guide for decision making. So when opportunities come up, everyone's sort of pulling in the same direction, which is really important. So the key elements of successful road mapping process that we have found is it should be well planned. There needs to be some participatory design, so everyone needs to have an equal voice. We really need to invite well so that there's diverse community representation. Nice, neutral, welcoming venue. This is a great example of that, although I will say that most of the work that we do in this space is in much smaller, much less fancy venues like showgrounds and community halls, which are also just wonderful. Strong feedback loops. So whenever there's consultation, whenever you're having a conversation about something, there needs to be strong feedback loops back to community so that they know exactly what was decided on and what the next steps are and what their role in that is. And also testing. Did we hear that correctly? Was there something that we missed? That they're updated regularly, because what we think needs to be in the roadmap now, we might actually check that goal off and we might not need that on the next one. And then, of course, great food and lots of coffee, which I'm sure we've all had here today as well. So I do have this one's very quick, this video, but this is just about the importance of the community roadmaps, and then we're very close to the finish.
Community roadmap. This roadmap sets out their principles and visions and the way they'd like to work together, along with their goals for what they'd like to achieve. Roadmapping is all around the initial way of coming together. Civic research will then hosted the opportunity to listen where everyone has a voice, and this has led to conversations that really matter in our community.
I've enjoyed the road mapping process because it means that you can collaborate with other charity partners in the area. You can hear about where they're at, where their challenges are at. And I really like seeing that overlap and in terms of finding the things that we're all experiencing, and I guess putting our strategic minds together as to how we address those in our regions together. And there's not a duplication of resources or everyone trying to tackle the same problem in silos, but all of us looking at it, coming from different angles and trying to work out how we'll address it as a community.
The road mapping exercises have also been an amazing way to meet other community organisations, many of whom we didn't know existed, and to make really good connections around working together with other services.
The IRCF program really provided a proof of concept for us at Community Connect in Business Milton Arabella. And the seed funding we got there to kick off some projects really leveraged us into further funding. We were able to get 2 really significant grants that followed up after we'd started through the road mapping and through the small grant seed funding that we got through IRCF.
The road mapping that ICF do is incredibly important because it gave you a sense of what was really important to our community and your place within that. Otherwise, everything that you do seems to be in isolation. And although we identified the need in our community for this particular project, it's great to see that the rest of the community recognises that and values that and knows that this is going to be part of the solutions for the community, and therefore they're more likely to jump on board to help in whatever way they can.
I love how the youth roadmap had a really great structure where we got input from a lot of young people first, and then nutted that down so that then we did workshops where those that were really interested in civic participation could look at their issues more deeply
and invest the time in, for those who are really willing and motivated to do that. We just got amazing results from it and amazing passionate ideas.
The benefits of developing a roadmap for the not-for-profit sector are immense. In co-design and creating this collective work. You don't need to hear from me on the screen and here, right? So you can tell I like scarves. And I just definitely want to make sure that we have time to get to the rest of it as well. So I think that the message is pretty clear, right? Is that coming together and creating these collective roadmaps that guide decision making is really, really important and can lead to some really incredible outcomes. So what are those outcomes? I'll finish off with this. So what we've found is that doing this, and this doesn't take a huge amount of funding. I should probably say that too, because it's sort of, I know it all sounds like, well, there's all this funding. What Matt was talking about in that video was the funding that it was actually leveraged because of this work. And what you heard Jill talk about before, you know, the $1 to $2 million that SureTrack was able to get through this process was leveraged because they did have a plan and they did come together and build this capability as a community. The grants that were coming through the IRCF program were somewhere between $5,000 and $20,000. And a lot of the time they were around employing a staff member to help pull things together, having a community facilitator, funding a backbone organisation within the community to actually be able to step back and do the work, do this sort of networking capability building work instead of just focusing like we all have to do on the day-to-day grind of actually just keeping the lights on and making sure that we're there to serve our communities. So the outcomes, increased collaboration and partnership. I won't have time to go through all of these in detail, but the biggest thing is shifting away from siloed efforts and into more collective problem solving. And what we found was that 88% of participating not-for-profits reported stronger collaboration across the sectors and led to some really incredible outcomes. The cultural connection within community was really significant as well. There was a lot of organisations that were unclear, you know, who do I go to when I would like to do a welcome to country at the beginning of my event? How do I make sure that I can have a more cultural competency and about, you know, connecting to local Aboriginal-led organisations? Leadership capacity and paid roles. So 70% of roles that came into organisations through the IRCF program continued post-program because they were able to actually find new funding sources based on the evidence that came from the success of having those roles. Really important. Stronger systems that enable sustainability. 75% of organisations reported greater internal capability to plan and act strategically, which is really important for long-term sustainability. And then leveraging, driving greater impact. So again, we talked about 60% secured additional funding, and there were some organisations that secured very significant additional funding. And what I find most significant about that was, yes, it funded their own individual efforts, but it also funded their ability to become backbone organisations, connector organisations, create communities of practice to really continue that work more broadly in these communities. This case study, I thought, given the audience, given your sort of legal focus, this was one of the incredible outcomes on the South Coast. So there were two organisations that were participating in the IRCF program. One of them, Muddy Puddles, and you'll see the two CEOs down on the screen there. Muddy Puddles went through the IRCF program, did some capacity building activities, and actually came to the conclusion that they weren't really sustainable as a standalone organisation. And in partnership with talking to the CEO of NOAA's Inclusion Services, realised that their best path forward was to merge. Obviously, there's lots of legal implications around merging, and I'm sure that they benefited from some wonderful legal support around that. But it really takes a huge amount of setting aside of ego and setting aside of, you know, your individual priorities to really look at the community as a whole. And that was one of the most incredible outcomes. So summary reflections, I'm not going to go through them all. We just talked about it. can have a glance at that later. And I just think I want to leave you with, imagine what's possible if there's the space and funding to co-design a roadmap that truly reflects the whole of community needs. Communities and backbone organisations like community legal centres are resourced for coordination and leadership, not just the churn of your services, which are so vitally important, but you also need the resourcing for those other things. And if partnerships, especially funding partnerships, span 5+ years and invest in long-term sustainability and core resilience building. I'll be around until at least lunchtime if we don't have time for questions. And again, I just want to thank you so much for having me today, and I'll hand over to Ellie.
There's no third step. She says that she gets her timer out as well. So good morning, folks. Thanks. We are one of the organisations that has benefited from seed funding from FRRR, and I'd like to make that known as I start out on this storytelling adventure with you. So yeah, my name's Ellie Bird. I'm the Executive Director of Resilient Lismore, and I drive this myself. So I'd acknowledge that we are here on Biripi country, and thanks to Uncle Bill for that incredibly poetic welcome to country. I just loved it. I loved that reminder to really connect in with the country that we're on and the beauty that's all around us. I pay deep respects to elders past and present, and I also acknowledge the elders and the leaders in the communities that I come from. So I'm from Widjabul Waible country, Lismore, in the heart of the Bundjalung Nation, and I always acknowledge the incredible leadership of the Koori Mail following the disaster of 2022 in Lismore in their support for communities across our region. If you don't know the story of the Koori Mail following the 2022 floods, please find out. Go and have a little Google. That's your homework, because the work that they did was incredible. Incredibly grounded in care, compassion, country, and the kinship and relationships that so underpin the incredible strength and resilience of First Nations communities. So a little bit of a trigger warning, I suppose. Some of my friends and colleagues are in the audience, people from the Northern Rivers, people who have lived through floods in other communities. I acknowledge the recent disasters that have happened here in this community. So this is big stuff that we're talking about, and please feel free to choose your own adventure. We'll try to get through the trauma story pretty quickly so we can get on to the stuff that I really want to talk to you about, which is partnerships and collaboration in response. So this is Lismore. Probably that trigger warning needs to be said to myself as well when I have these conversations. So in that photo, you can see about 12 of the approximately 7,000 homes across the Northern Rivers that were inundated in the floods from 2022. In that photo, you can see the premises of the Northern Rivers Community Legal Centre completely inundated. In that photo, you can see the premises that we currently work from, that Resilient Lismore operates out of in the middle there. Our ceiling is sort of on the left of the photo, pretty much barely visible. And so if you haven't been to Lismore, it's very hard to understand what exactly happened in our community. Can I ask who has been to Lismore? Great, excellent. Keep coming back. We'd like to see you. Who's been to Lismore since the disaster of 2022? Right, things have changed a bit for the rest of you who've been there prior. But at the heart of our community is incredible strength and resilience. So please do keep coming. We're an incredible bunch of people, and yeah, we'd love to see you. So just want to bring myself into the story a little bit. This is me. That's me responding to the 2017 disaster when the flood went over our levee wall for the first time. It was the biggest disaster we'd seen in 40 years, and we thought we would never see anything like it ever again. But something in the back of my mind was like, oh, what happens if it goes higher?
what will happen. On that day, we were coordinating 900 volunteers who'd come into our community. It was wild. None of them bought any lunch or water, but that's another story. The next one's a little bit confronting for me. It's a bit private. This is me. A couple of days after the 2022 disaster, bucketing down with rain, just outside that Portaloo where I was having a little moment. There was boxes and boxes of food in cardboard boxes that were falling apart under shitty 3x3 gazebos. People were standing outside the Centrelink bus waiting for relief. I had community members falling apart in my arms. And you can see on my face there that I really did not know how we were going to get through what we were facing. This is me, Cyclone Alfred, just recently. We had just packed up our entire community again. We evacuated the whole city because the water was not that far below the levee bank. And we knew that if we got the rainfall that may have been coming off the tail end of that cyclone, we could have been looking at another 2022. So how do I say something like that to the Prime Minister when he comes into our community? How do I talk to him about community resilience? How do I talk to him about the needs in our community and how to make sure that we are resourcing and funding grassroots, community-based, bottom-up work? It's very hard. I did get an extension to the DRF fund, which was a valuable thing to achieve. So a bit more on impact. These are the SES impact assessments. So top left there is Lismore. Everything that is red is severely damaged. Everything that is orange is severely damaged. We had, like I said, we had about 1,700 homes inundated almost to their ceiling of a second-story building. And on the bottom right is the Northern Rivers. So it's really important when we talk about the disaster of 22 that we acknowledge our neighbouring communities, Lismore and downstream communities, Corrockeye, Woodburn, Wardell, Broadwater. We had communities up in the hills where houses slid down hills, a Willumbar in the north and down into the Clarence in the south. It was Australia's second largest disaster ever. It is comparable to Cyclone Tracy, in my opinion. The difference is that our recovery has been complex, bureaucratically and widely criticised for the way that it's been rolled out in comparison to Cyclone Tracy, which was efficient, was driven by government, and, you know, they're a bit chalk and cheese, so they're actually right up there with each other, in my opinion. Just a few more impact photos so that you really get a handle on what happened in our community. That's our library, which just recently reopened, probably a couple of months ago, one of the best moments of my recent history. It was so beautiful walking into that library and seeing it restored. And people's treasured memories out on the gutters. This is some of the impacts to people's homes. So disasters are human, they are social, they are the impacts that occur to people. This is our flood footprint. And what is very stark is when you put it up against our CEFA mapping. So if you don't already know this, it's pretty clear from that slide that the people who have the most disadvantage in our communities are the people who are living with the highest risk. The flood zones are where the poor property is, the poor quality property, and it's where there are high numbers of rentals and low quality and cheap housing. So it's going to be fascinating to see what happens with our new census data to see what changes have occurred in our community, but I would say that that will still be incredibly stark. The other thing I want to just use to set the context of the conversation that we're having today is this is a slide that shows the capability of emergency management organisations and I would propose governments when it comes to disaster recovery and resilience. And what you see happening there is as we get up into disasters of catastrophic scale, the capacity and the capability of emergency management agencies to respond is inadequate. So the dark blue line doesn't really change, but the scale goes right up. And my driving reason for being is that that gap is where community sits. That gap is where the community sector sits. That gap is where we collectively sit in order to be able to supplement and to find ways to ensure that our communities are still adequately supported. So a little bit more storytelling. So on the top left there, you see again the incredible Koori Mail, who this was a couple of days into their startup, working under shitty 3x3 gazebos. And in the back of that top left photo on the pink mark on the Browns Creek pump station, this is at the levee wall where it goes over. You can see the 14.5 river height marked up there on the pump station. On the right is Resilient Lismore in our very early response. And bottom right is the car park where we operated out of for 8 months, providing direct relief services to our community in a highly disrupted environment. On the bottom left is one of the first gatherings of the Lismore Wellbeing Collective. So as well as supporting our communities directly, we have also played a very key role in facilitating interagency networks and bringing community sector organisations together so that we could figure out how to collaborate. Because the other key thing to understand about the impact in Lismore was that the majority of our community service organisations are based in that flood zone. So we had significant disruption across the sector. We had to figure out ways to work together. A bit more about us. We've evolved. We started as a feisty little community group of grassroots people, and now we're a medium-sized charity by the definition. We have 18 staff, and it's been a rapid growth. It's been a journey, that's for sure, especially for me. These are the things that we do. We provide direct support, we manage volunteers, we do skill building workshops primarily, we have a tool library, we do community events, we do a lot of advocacy, and we do a lot of networking. We repair people's homes. We have facilitated, we're up to about $7 million now in terms of relief work that we've done in our community, and we deliver the Disaster Ready Together project. So I'm almost there, where we want to talk about. So the Disaster Ready Together project ran in its initial phase at least 12 months ago now. It's taken quite a while to get some additional funding through the door. So this shows the impact on our community service sector. We had 136 organisations respond, and you can see that they had been impacted by multiple disasters, cumulative disasters, which is a really important thing for us to be considering. I know it was one of the provocations from yesterday afternoon's session. How do we think about the fact that disasters are no longer one-off? They keep happening to the same communities over and over again. How can we make decisions based on the fact that we have cumulative impact, not just one-off impact? So you can see there in the middle on the pie chart, the 2022 floods, we had about 75% of our organisations experience severe or complete disruption of service provision. And that disruption was their premises were unusable. They lost records. They had physical assets lost or damaged. A lot of staff resignations. The other thing that came out of the conversation from yesterday afternoon from our local community was the fact that so many of those staff were impacted themselves. And so those folks then have to go on their own flood recovery journey. And sometimes when something has to give, it's your job. Sometimes it's, I just can't keep showing up for work anymore. I have to focus on myself. I have to put this thing to the side. And so in a sector where we have very significant staff challenges, we had this extra overlay come on top of us again as well. But out of disruption comes silver linings. And so what we did see was our networks strengthened, our networks expanded. We made relationships with new people. We sprung into existence and didn't exist before, and we got to know all of the incredible people working across the sector and to forge and find ways for us to collaborate and do things together. You can see in those comments there that, you know, we will continue to respond creatively and collectively. We will continue to work together and find ways to provide wraparound support to our clients, so that we can ensure that we are going person-centered, holistically. I loved hearing you all talking about holistic approaches in the conversation yesterday. And that really has to be the way that we collectively work so that we can support our communities through these really full-on and significant disruption events. It's a little bit of a list of the organisations we've worked with over the last 3.5 years, in varying ways. Some of those are pretty light touch and some of them are very deep and long-lasting relationships. Super proud of this one. This is our Repair to Return partnership, and this example was definitely the one that was able to enable us to secure a $5 million commitment from the incoming Minns government for property repair. But it was underpinned by a deep partnership with the Diocese of Lismore, with the Lismore Soup Kitchen, with our construction company partners, Joel Jensen Constructions, and this incredible organisation, Reese Foundation, who work to recruit and deploy volunteer plumbers. It was the first time that they had done work like that in Australia. They usually go overseas to developing countries. And so they came and worked with us and really enabled us to develop the sophistication to be able to run property repair programs. The other project I want to talk to you about a little bit, because this is where we are now. So what we're doing now, as well as continuing to try to meet the needs of our community in Lismore, is we are working to try to sync up all of the different initiatives that have commonalities. So across the Northern Rivers, in a lot of those locations were places where community initiatives sprung into being and responded to the needs of their community. When you think about that bar graph where there was the big gaps, this is where community stepped up and said, yep, there's a huge gap here. There's a huge need. We want to support our community. So a lot of those are still going. Some of them are new. And what we are doing is we are syncing them up under the Northern Rivers Community Resilience Alliance, because we want to reduce replication. We want to reduce the time and effort it takes for each of those initiatives to relearn the lessons that we've had to learn over the last 8 years. We want to fast track community resilience. We want to ensure that people have access to the tools and the networks that they need to be able to thrive in the community resilience and disaster preparedness work that they're doing. Because we know in the Northern Rivers, and potentially we probably need to think about this for the entire east coast of New South Wales, if not the whole country, we're going to experience larger disasters. We're going to experience regional disasters, and we have to make sure that communities are well resourced to be able to be a part of the solution and a part of the response. There's a whole lot of governance that is going into it, and a lot of work that we're doing to ensure that that grassroots work is intersecting with government. So we've deliberately flipped this so that the community is at the top and the government structures, we are feeding into the government structures. This is new and emergent work that's happening with the emergency management agencies in our community, and full kudos to them for coming on the journey with us. There's a significant culture change underway with those emergency management agencies. It's not common for communities to have a seat at the table in those sorts of spaces, but our emergency management colleagues have also learnt that community has to be part of the circumstances, part of the search, part of the response and the solution. And I would extend this to the disaster recovery space as well. A number of you probably have been sitting in the Reconstruction Authority recovery forums for the Mid-Coast, for example, if you work in this particular area, and you would know how well, I hope you realise how vastly improved that process is to what it was in 2022, when the community sector was completely missing from the thinking about how to do disaster recovery. And so it is my great hope that the Reconstruction Authority and that the government will continue to prioritise the inclusion and the expertise of the community sector, the expertise of yourselves in terms of how to support and meet the needs of community members who are impacted. I also want to touch on this one because I think this is really important to remember in terms of principles and the way that we work and how we can be flexible and adaptable and ensure that we're working in person-centered ways that suit our communities. So as much as possible, being flexible and integrated, proactive and initiating, maintaining our networks and our overlapping boundaries. Bit contentious, but how do we have a minimum of policy and procedure and red tape? How do we as feisty little organisations try to reduce that load on ourselves while still ensuring that we meet our compliance requirements? Based on personal relationships, I've stolen a phrase recently, which is moving at the speed of trust. I think that trust-based relationships are super, super important. And how do we ensure that we're focusing on taking the time required to build trust and to move at the speed of trust? And in doing so, do we create ownership by the community? Do we create relationships in our community and reciprocity between organisations, individuals, and community stakeholders? So I've raced through all of that quite quickly, but the other thing, and probably the last thing that I want to lead you with, and we might get 10 minutes or so for some conversation from the audience. This one. This is just some evidence of how the approach that we're taking is working. So we took some time to survey our stakeholders and to ask all of them. We did an organisational 360. We were like, well, is this actually working? Are we actually working in ways that are helpful for you? Is the work that we're doing influencing our community recovery? And overwhelmingly, our stakeholders did tell us back that, yeah, they trust us and they see that we are leaders and that they appreciate our approach to seeking partnerships and working effectively with them, and that we have successfully brokered change relationships with our emergency management agencies. So it's paying off for us, this focus on relational trust-based work. And I'm really hopeful that it's paying off more broadly in our community. The Disaster Ready Together project is about to relaunch for its second iteration. So watch this space. You can find all of the details on our website. We will be hosting the Disaster Ready Together Summit in the Northern Rivers next year, and I would love to see you there. And so this is the last thing I just want to leave with you. This is the Eisenhower matrix, if you haven't seen it. I have it up on my wall. It really guides how I prioritise and think about the things that we need to focus on. So we often spend most of our time on the left-hand side of that slide, don't we? We're in the urgent and important quadrant. And then sometimes we're in the urgent but not important quadrant, but someone's really pestering us for that work. And it's just so easy to just get into the urgent emails and make sure that that's where we're spending all our time. When we start to verge into burnout, we probably start to spend a bit too much time in the not urgent and not important space, because we don't need to think too hard in that quadrant. You can just hang out there and tinker away at some things. But the quadrant that we really need to make sure that we're paying attention to is the not urgent but important, because that is where we're laying the groundwork for the future. That is where we're laying the groundwork for what is going to pay off for us 12, 18, 24, 36 months into the future. That is where we need to put our energy into building partnerships and relationships, because it's not urgent, but it's really important. Because when we live through disruption like that, it's all shoulders to the wheel, it's trust-based, and we all have to push together in the same direction in service of our communities. because together we're stronger. Yeah, so that's me. If you feel like QRing us, you can find us. But we're pretty easy to find with a Google search. So thank you very much for your time and for your attention and for all your good work. It's been really inspiring spending yesterday with you all. I have so much deep respect for community legal centres and for the work that you do to support communities to navigate a very complicated space. So thank you to all of you for everything that you do and for the work that we do together in partnership, particularly for my local friends. Thanks. I think we've got 10 minutes for questions. So there's good. No? 5 minutes left. I'm taking 10. I'm ignoring that sign. That mic doesn't work. 2, the abundance. An abundance of microphones.
Hi, I'm Darren. Ellie, I'd just like to say thank you for that. I'm originally from Queensland and I've seen the disasters that you went through and my heart went out to all of you. I worked in a disaster with the disaster management up in Queensland with Lifeline and all that. And I know the sadness, and especially when you said workers and that the workers weren't supported, they had to resign. And that touched me. Up home, we supported the workers, our organisations where we worked, we supported the workers. They had to go home, fix their homes, look after their children. They still had a job. But my heart goes out to all of you in the Northern Rivers. But the other thing I wrote down was workers support, community input. I think that's a very important thing because it is about community, and it's. I've lived through with one big disaster, the 1990 floods in Queensland. There was no community input at all, even from council. There was nothing.
And same in the Northern Rivers. There's so many different tangents I could go on for this conversation. But yeah, our community has not been included effectively. Sometimes when I feel forgiving, I think it's because of scale. But at the same time, I think that priority focus on building governance and inclusion and adequate community engagement structures so that we can have a voice in what's happening in our community is not prioritised effectively. There are a lot of silver linings and a lot of lessons that have come out of that disaster, but that one I don't think is being learnt. We are 3.5 years on from our disaster, and there is still no way for our community to feel heard, to feel listened to feel like that they have a way to influence what's happening to us. Now we're living through, as was so beautifully spoken about yesterday morning, we're living through the impacts of the largest adaptation program Australia has ever seen. Our community has 600 empty homes of those 1,700 homes with fences around them, and there are very poor outcomes for our community that we will live with for many, many years to come. And still no adequate way for us collectively, transparently, inclusively to be listened to or to participate in what might happen in our community. And I won't say much more, but don't get me started on council. As an ex-councillor, which is probably the caveat that I need to put in that conversation. Right, what do you call a group of microphones?
I was just curious, was there any sort of inquiry into the response of the emergency services sending out the alarm at the last minute at like the 12th hour?
Yes,
Okay.
yeah.
And
there's-
has that gone quite far into?
So there's the Northern Rivers flood inquiry, so quite a comprehensive inquiry into what went wrong with the warnings and the notifications and all of that. There's a lot of work going on, huge amounts of work, and you know, a lot of it is really promising. There's some great citizen-led stuff around improving flood knowledge that's coming down from the basin, but yeah. So yes, big inquiries. Some of it's being acted on. There's a lot of recommendations though that maybe aren't. That comment yesterday about inquiry culture, right, is really really relevant.
Hi, thank you. I'm interested in, so obviously there's always a government response to a disaster, and that's necessary and important. What kind of tools do you find the most useful for creating space for communities to have a voice? Like, are there opportunities that you maybe reflect on and think in hindsight, actually, that was an opportunity that community could have used if they'd spotted it at the time? Or are there language or words that you can use when you're talking to government and agencies about being part of recovery? What does that look like?
I mean, I think the only thing I want to say is, of course, all my questions are for Ellie as well, but I think I would just say that the work that FRRR does in programs like IRCF is definitely not in the immediate recovery space. We are actually in the space after that, which is responding to all the questions that you have now, which is how do you bring community together after something like that to really build that social infrastructure and that ability to have those conversations and build the sort of the strength and resilience and planning and put all those pieces in place so that the next time that there is a disruption or a shock or a disaster, which we know are coming, you'll have all of those tools available and that trust will have been built so that those conversations are happening seamlessly. And as Ellie said, meeting that space that is unmet by government and other response services. So there's space for both, right? We need the immediate recovery response, and then we need the long-term building of you know, community strength so that you're capable and feel confident to handle that when it comes, and not just sort of like, oh my gosh, what do we do now? Which I think is what we saw in Lismore and won't happen the next time because of Ellie's great work.
Well, mine and other people's. So I guess I'll start by saying that's kind of what we're trying to do with the Alliance, right? We're trying to build that network of community leadership across the region so that next time we're impacted, hopefully it's not within the next 5 years, but you know, my lived experience says that they come pretty quickly. So next time we're impacted, we've got that pre-established network of community leadership that can advocate and intersect with government. So there's that. In terms of models, so I don't have the I don't have the solutions. All I know is that we have had nothing. So in Victoria, they have community recovery committees, which, you know, sometimes work, sometimes don't. Every community is different. When we were impacted, people like look to Mallacoota. Mallacoota is a great model of a community resilience committee. It was a democratically elected process. They're still going strong. They did their community roadmap process. In the Northern Rivers in Lismore, we've had a like it's pretty textbook how badly it's gone. But anyway, so when it was the Northern Rivers Reconstruction Corporation, they had an idea to run a participatory democracy process. So we're a much larger community. So let's get a participatory democracy process established by a community ballot. We'll send out ballots in the mail. We'll bring together a randomly selected group of people. We'll take them on the journey. We'll get their insights and their perspectives. They're not the same people that always put their hands up. So maybe we'll truly get a diverse community input into this process. Because of stupidity in local politics, that then got shot down and didn't actually go anywhere. So there was a lot of time and effort invested into trying to, from the community's perspective, trying to get this thing up and running. and then council essentially shot it down in flames because heaven forbid the community should give them some advice and then they not follow that advice. So, you know, I think in terms of principles and values, courage is one that is really important. Courage in our leaders to be able to make difficult decisions, but also to really value listening to our communities. And then the third thing I'd probably say is, you know, we have the community engagement IAP spectrum. So let's start there and make sure that our engagement is not tokenistic, is not just an online survey for only those people to engage with. Once you start me going, I'll just keep going.
We are going to have to wrap it up. I'm sorry. Thank you so much. It actually is really inspiring, and it's particularly inspiring for me as at the peak when we're developing our strategic plan, how best we're going to be able to support the sector to really do what you're talking about. So thank you, and that you are both going to be around for a bit longer. So if people want to have a chat, they can grab you. Thank you.